Hello and a very warm welcome to BBC News. The United Nations has led international condemnation of Myanmar's military rulers over the killing of dozens of pro-democracy protesters. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Washington was horrified by what he called the reign of terror. There were similar statements from Britain and the European Union. But in a sign of how difficult it will be to agree international action, it's emerged that delegations from China and Russia were among those attending a military parade. Well, let's get more on this with our correspondent, Laura Bicker, who's monitoring developments from Bangkok. Laura, this development very interesting, that presence of delegations from China and Russia at the annual Armed Forces Day. What can we read into that?
Well, it's difficult to read anything into it. All we know is that certainly both Russia and China have been very quiet in any condemnation. And certainly a senior defence minister from Russia was part of that Armed Forces Day parade. And there were a number of diplomats from 8 countries, including China, at that parade. So when it comes to any kind of action from the United Nations within the Security Council, it's worth noting that Beijing and Moscow both have a veto. So if they're trying to push anything like sanctions through, particularly on the oil and gas industry, they will need the votes of Russia and China, and that's all but guaranteed. But you mentioned the international condemnation there. It has been swift from many parts of the world. I think one of the most significant I've seen is a joint statement from 12 countries and the defence chiefs of 12 countries, including the United States, the UK, Japan and South Korea, in which they call on the military to cease this action and remind the military in Myanmar that they're supposed to be protecting the people, not turning their guns on the people.
We saw what is thought to be the most deadly day of violence against the protesters by the military in the last 24 hours. Reports of, in some cases, the reports are that 100 or more were shot and killed. Is there any sign of things calming down? Is there any sign of the military being a bit more restrained in their approach or not?
Well, overnight we're getting sporadic reports again, and it's worth emphasising that it's very difficult for us to confirm anything going on within Myanmar. A number of freelance journalists are packing up and leaving because it's simply too dangerous for them to operate. But when it comes to the reports coming out from local media, we're seeing that still the crackdown continued overnight. People have 2 choices. They either hide within their houses and keep their heads down, or they continue to go out into the streets. What we're hearing today, again through local media reports, again I cannot confirm them, but the pictures that we've seen appear to be at funerals where the military are attempting to intervene even in the funerals of protesters who are trying to bury their loved ones. So it doesn't seem that this is going to go away anytime soon. The protesters have told the BBC on a number of occasions they will continue to fight for a return to democracy. And we saw them out in the streets yesterday armed with slingshots and wooden sticks up against an armed, trained security force who are firing live rounds. But they say they will continue despite the danger.
Okay, Laura, many thanks for the update. Laura Bicker there for us. Well, Tom Andrews is the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar. He says international condemnation will ring hollow unless there's also concrete action.
It seems, particularly if you're in Myanmar, words of condemnation are beginning to ring hollow. I think what the people of Myanmar would like and desperately need is for the international community to not just condemn, but also to take action and to hold this brutal military fully accountable. There are many things that can be done that have not been done and should be done. Let's start with the United Nations Security Council. That's why the Security Council exists, to deal with just such crises. And so this has not come before the Security Council for a debate and a resolution and a vote. It should. That's what they're there for. If the Security Council can't act for whatever reason, then I believe it's important for those countries willing to take action to work together to coordinate a full range of options, including tough, focused sanctions, that working together can have a cumulative impact that will have a real power punch to the junta. There has to be an emergency summit of countries who are willing to take action if the Security Council can't take action. And what we have to do is take this, there are dozens of various sanctions regimes around the world. We need to coordinate them into one coherent whole and to focus them together so that they'll have the strongest possible punch and direct themselves to the source of revenue that's flowing into the pockets of this regime and empowering its brutality. People expect, have predicted that if it comes to a vote, that Russia, that China would veto. Now, first of all, China has been making some statements recently. They've condemned the violence, at least. They've called for the release of political prisoners. So I'm not sure how they would vote if a vote happened, nor do I know how Russia would vote. But that's the point. It has not been before the Security Council. A vote has not been taken. I think it should, and that China, Russia, and all the other members of the Security Council should stand up and be counted one way or another. I think the key to this are the people in Myanmar. It's extraordinary what they're doing. The civil disobedience movement is powerful, it's growing, it's tenacious, it's creative. That ultimately is where success is going to come, but they rely upon the support of the international community. So just, $1 billion alone each year go into the pockets of the generals from the oil and gas industry. If we were to stop that flow of oil and gas revenue into their pockets, that would make a big difference, as well as cutting off revenue in the various businesses and conglomerates they have control over. It by itself, it's not going to end this brutality, but taken together, we have a real shot at making a big dent on what's going on here and changing the trajectory of this horrible, horrible nightmare.
Some Andrews there. People should not squander the gains made against coronavirus in recent months.